Okay, welcome. Fantasy Fire and Ice, brought to you as always by Sportstopia at Sportstopia HQ on all the socials. So listen, week 6 happened. I hope you too weren't in the blue medical tent. We like to start these shows with a little mix-up of all the takes we had heading into another week of NFL action and something we like to call the fantasy soup. Let's look at the beautiful graphic. Yes, a mix-up of all of our hopefully cold and hot takes. There's the round of applause. So maybe you heard there were some big upsets yesterday in the NFL. And if you had the 49ers in your survivor pool, well, you're dead.
See that?
Right. Is there anybody on that Browns team worth starting? I mean, because I think with a PJ Walker, he brings everybody's value down.
Yeah, and Jerome Ford's banged up right now. So I don't really trust like a Pierre Strong role. I don't trust a Kareem Hunt role. Do you trust PJ Walker getting the ball to Amari Cooper? No. David Njoku? No. Elijah Moore, only because maybe they've been using him out of the backfield stuff, but like even then, like your output is your ADOT is like 2.5 or whatever it is right now. He's catching the ball majority of the time behind the line of scrimmage. There's nothing in Cleveland that really entices me, especially with a PJ Walker at quarterback.
There's nothing in Cleveland that really entices me. Now, look, on a normal day, people and tourists might say that, but not yesterday, not with the Browns, and not with the 49ers. Do you hear that? That's PJ Walker's theme music, and he means business. Okay, well, look, he didn't have that great of a game, but Amari Cooper, he had 100 yards. Do you trust him with PJ Walker? No. I mean, yes. Yes, we do. Jerome Ford, Kareem Hunt, they did enough on the ground to get the job done. Really, the game was about the injuries and the defense, but we'll get to that later on. But for now, though, Cleveland and PJ Walker walking on with a win. All right, next up. Sometimes you look at a game on the betting board and you think, nah, that's a trap. But apparently, the boys from Detroit, they don't fall for traps.
I almost want to instantly lock in Tampa Bay. Are you seeing what I'm seeing there?
Yeah, on initial outlook, right? That's my first thought. But the problem is the Lions are legit, right? And the Lions, you know why everybody like the Lions? Because Lions make people money. The Lions have been phenomenal versus the spread for really the better part of 2.5 seasons now. And there's such a great ATS team, home, road. It sounds crazy. The Lions really don't have no weakness right now. Everything you're saying from a handicap perspective is correct. It's a funny looking line. And if it don't go to 3.5 Sunday morning, it looks even funnier. But I just can't go on the other side of the Lions for some odd, right? That's where I'm at. Trust me, I've tried betting against the Lions. It don't work.
Corey is going to get a Honolulu Blue Ferrari betting on the Detroit Lions. 3 points, no problem. Baker Mayfield probably wishes he was still on the bye week watching Oklahoma beat Texas in the Red River. Anywhere but on the field against those Detroit Lions. 20-6, Detroit with the win and the cover. All right, so it's October, and it's a very, very spooky month. But nothing scarier than seeing a double-digit line on the betting board. Now, if you listen to Simon, you might have made the right choice.
All these double-digit lines this week, we got some real expected blowouts, and they scare me away from wanting to touch those games. I'm always a little bit nervous betting on either side of those. It seems difficult to imagine the Giants losing by less than 14. Sorry, Terrell. But I also don't have confidence. This Bills team has just not shown up a couple times this season. And they can let their foot off the gas in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden they win by 11 instead of by 20.
It's full-on trick-or-treat with the Bills every week. Will Josh Allen throw for 400 yards, or will he throw 4 picks? Is James Cook the guy, or is the zombie that is Latavius Murray getting the run? Who knows? But don't bet him as a double-digit fave. All right, so if you're named Josh and you play in the NFL, chances are our Cody Carpentier thinks you're a good fantasy bet.
sleeper running back play of the week over at my rankings at sportstopia.io is Joshua Kelley on the Chargers. Everyone's forgetting what Joshua Kelley was in week 1 with Austin Eckler in the backfield together. They don't want to lean on Austin Eckler 100% of the snaps. They want to utilize both of these guys, and that's what Joshua Kelley does both. He is a consummate number 2 in the NFL. Josh Kelley is only owned in 30% of leagues on Sleeper. Make sure you go add him in all of your seasonal leagues and utilize Joshua Kelley this week. Another big one is Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs is a top 5 play this week against the Patriots. They've turned the volume up on Josh Jacobs over the last couple of weeks. He's had 21 targets over the last 3 weeks in this Las Vegas Raiders offense. Look for Jacobs to continue to vault up these rankings and stay in the top 5 again this week.
This might be the only time I get to say this, but quit joshing around. Man, the dad jokes, they kill me. All right, so Joshua Kelley, no, I didn't forget how good he was in week 1. It's the reason I used all of my fab when Eckler was out to get who I thought would be an RB1. But as Cody would be the first to tell you, some guys are just RB2s. We'll see what he does tonight. As for Josh Jacobs, we expected a little more, but, it's tough going up against the Bill Belichick defense. So maybe hope springs eternal for the other Josh tonight in Monday Night Football. And look, we don't usually have an honorable mention, but I do want to get to what Corey had to say about the quarterback from the Eagles.
I think Jalen Hurts is the best player in football right now.
The best player in football. Now, look, it's tough to argue that, but Hurts' performance yesterday was anything but the best player in football level worthy. They lost to the Jets. Corey, we need to talk about something. You did this to the Dallas Cowboys a few weeks ago when you said their defense was going to be fine. It's one of the best. And then they proceeded to lose to the Arizona Cardinals. You did this to the man that I thought it couldn't be done to, Jalen Hurts. This is my personal plea. If you are a friend of Corey Parson, if you have a big event coming up, maybe a wedding, and Corey is going to try to bless your big event or your big day, you need to stop this man. The power of his jinx is undeniable. We've seen it twice already. Stay off of Corey's list. I'm just kidding, Corey. We love you. All right, with that was the fantasy soup. So let's bring in the guys who are much smarter than I am. As always, joining us, we just saw him, Cody Carpentier at Carpentier NFL. He's one of our best rankers, if not the best. He's certainly the best one I'm talking to currently. And also we have Mr. High Low FF at High Low FF on the socials, Mark Garcia. Boys, another week 6, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but I'm really glad you guys didn't get injured, because the amount of injuries I saw on my teams was just brutal. A brutal day for a lot of folks across the board. We're going to get to that in a second, but we like to start with the last game we just saw. And that Giants-Bills game, I'm not going to say it set the game of football back, but it certainly didn't propel it into another stratosphere. So, Cody, let's talk about this. I talked about the Bills and seemingly being a little Jekyll and Hyde. I'm not saying they're bad by any means, but what happened last night? I mean, we've seen this Giants team. We know they're capable of being lit up. Why didn't they get lit up?
I mean, I think that the number one thing is that people forget that this Giants defense is uber talented, and they've gotten behind the 8 ball quite a bit this season in games where they've gotten blown out in. The offense, I think, has scored 1 touchdown outside of that game against Arizona. They had a pick 6 as well from Jason Pinnock in another game, but like the offense just hasn't really gotten going to allow this defense to do what they're best at, which is getting after the passer and really wreaking havoc with Dexter Lawrence and Williams and Thibodeau, like all these guys. Like this, the defense is actually not bad. It's just that when you get behind the 8 ball, you're in a certain predicament. Now, the game against the Bills last night, the Bills, I think, kind of shot themselves in the foot with that Gabe Davis fumble early on. That was really like what felt like to me like a momentum shift. I thought they were going to go down and score there, and they give the ball back to the Giants, and then that one deep ball to Darius Slayton over Kaiir Elam, who is now just playing in his 2nd game this year, and they didn't really want to play him. They've talked about not fully trusting Kaiir Elam. So just a multitude of things like that, and then situations like the Giants, if you watch the game, they had the opportunity going into halftime. They had that, complete mismanagement of time. If they would have gotten a field goal or thrown the football, other things could have happened, and then the way the game ended as well. But the Buffalo Bills, I mean, they were just over in London. They went over to London on Friday, played a game on Sunday morning, and then came back, and they had this Sunday night game. It's not the easiest turn of events over a course of a 10-day stretch, but they did it, and they got out of it with a win against the Giants last night, and a win's a win in the NFL. So you got to take them while you can get them.
It's good to know that I wasn't the only one dealing with a hangover yesterday, because apparently all of the Bills were with their London hangover. Mark, on the other side of the ball, or actually no, let's stick with the Bills here. I'm wondering, besides Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, because I mean they're going to be more often than not, if not great every week, they're going to be good. And Diggs, 10 grabs for 100 yards, that's like the perfectly round number game, and that's what you expect from Diggs. But outside of those two, is there anybody else on that Bills offense that you're trusting week to week? I thought it could be Gabe Davis, but he didn't show up last night either.
Yeah, it's probably the man who didn't play yesterday in Dalton Kincaid. We've seen this offense transition to heavy rates of 12 personnel, and they were kind of thrown for a loop yesterday in trying to figure out how they were going to attack a Giants team, a Wink Martindale defense that is going to be coming after them. They kind of knew that Wink is who he is, and Wink is an interesting case because he's a defensive coordinator that kind of just plays his type of defense and doesn't necessarily tweak those tendencies for the opponent. So when you come into a game against the New York Giants, you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get elevated blitz rates. You're going to get high rates of cover 3 and man coverage behind that. And it seemed like, for whatever reason, whether it was the travel, whether it was, the schedule over the recent history for the Bills, they had a very hard time game planning their personnel alignments to match up best with what they were going to expect with Wink Martindale's defense. So to answer that question without the roundabout discussion, it's probably Dalton Kincaid if I had to place my bet on a player outside of the top two there in Buffalo for the rest of the season.
And I think going into the season, people might have expected Kincaid to do what we're seeing out of Sam Laporta there with the Lions. I know Kincaid, he missed the game, obviously, so he doesn't have the exact he doesn't have all the games that Laporta does. But I think as we head into the season and you have a rookie like him who can get more involved in the offense, I think that's a good bet. The last part about the Bills, and Cody, I'll pitch this to you. Am I wrong in thinking like this Latavius Murray experiment should end? James Cook had 14 carries on 71 yards. Latavius Murray almost had the same amount of touches, 12 carries, 45 yards. I'm not saying any of their yards per carry were that bad, but Cook's was much better. So why are we still trotting out Latavius Murray here?
I think you'd be a fool to give James Cook 85% of the snaps. I think that's just understanding what he is and what he can bring to the table from an efficiency standpoint and from a workload standpoint. Is you don't give this guy that's 197 pounds 30 touches. You just can't do that. Latavius Murray at 33, almost 34 years old, has just a weird amount of burst and explosion right now, and you kind of have to ride that. It makes sense that they have two between the tackles, Grinders and Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, to bounce off of James Cook, where James Cook brings that. You saw it on multiple carries last night where it was like zoom 9 yards downfield, like just quickly, and that's a good change of pace to have. Latavius is a piece to that puzzle that goes together. He's 17th right now in breakaway run rate on PFF, 34%, which is ahead of guys like Derrick Henry that are in his similar statures, 31%. So, and I was like going through that this morning, and I was like, dang, so Latavius is 4 years older, but like, if you're watching it, Latavius kind of looks like he's got more burst, more explosion than what Derrick Henry's bringing to the table right now. So I don't really know what to make of Latavius thing, but I think the Buffalo Bills know what they have in him, and they're just going to continue to ride him, because in these grind out football games, you want that 230-pound back just banging against that defense, and then you bring in James Cook and he just rips one right off of him. So I don't really know what to make of it, other than I think you'd be an incompetent franchise to just say, yeah, we're going to give James Cook 90% like teams do with Kyron Williams and Austin Eckler. I think that's not a safe way to play it.
Yeah, but don't they care about my fantasy team? I mean, isn't that where all of their decisions are being made in the front office based on who I need to score a touchdown? All right, on the other side of the ball, look, I know it's recency bias because they almost pulled the third big upset of the day, which would have been just a wild, as Better Boss in the comments just said, crazy week 6 in the NFL. Could have gotten crazier if a couple more things went their way. But let's start with the guy throwing the ball, Tyrod Taylor. Mark, is the Giants' offense better with Taylor than it is with Daniel Jones?
Well, we saw the good mixed with the bad out of Ty God, formerly known as Ty God. The first half debacle should not be. I mean, it's going to be covered no matter who you listen to. But that lost them the game. So based on everything that we've heard from that situation, it was 100% on Tyrod Taylor that basically audibled to a run play without a timeout with 11 seconds remaining from the one. That cannot happen.
Under no circumstance can that happen.
That cannot happen. But we also saw Jalen Hyatt play a career high in snap rate, career high in route participation rate. We saw this Giants offense, and we've talked about this in the past on the show, how teams were still trying to figure things out. It's the first 6 weeks of the NFL season. We're slowly transitioning. About week 8, 9, 10, that range is where we're going to start to see how teams want to be as the playoff picture starts to unfold. This Giants team showed us what they want to be moving forward. We saw Jalen Hyatt with an 80% route participation rate opposite Darius Slayton. So they're kind of beyond the let's give Isaiah Hodgins a bunch of snaps. We did see him late in the game when they needed a big-bodied wide receiver down low. But this is going to be Darius Slayton, Jalen Hyatt, and Wandale Robinson in 11 personnel with Darren Waller on the field and Saquon Barkley. So that was good. And in that, we saw this team finally able to take some shots downfield that we've been so missing up to this point in the season. And Tyrod Taylor made some breadbasket throws down the sideline to Darius Slayton that, quite frankly, we have not seen from this Giants team up to this point in the season. So there were some good, there were some very clear bads, but that ability to extend teams in the vertical and attack downfield via very well-placed throws from Tyrod Taylor was something that we haven't seen from this team up to this point.
Yeah, you got into a lot there, and you mentioned some of the receivers. In a PPR format, and Mark, I'll just kick it back to you. Like a PPR, you mentioned Slayton had the big plays there and Hyatt snap percentage. But Wandale had 8 grabs. So I guess if you had to target one of these receivers on a week to week, like I guess you look at the floor, right? Who's got the highest floor. Would you think Robinson could be now a Giants number 1 receiver if you had to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, on a weekly basis, if I'm looking at start-sit decisions and I have one roster spot and I have both, or I have all 3 of the New York Giants wide receivers, Wandale just makes that easy plug and play because he's always going to be the guy for the schemed usage in this offense. He's going to be a high targets per route run rate. And now that his snap rate is catching up, this is his, 3rd game coming back from an extended absence. That is something that is valuable in a PPR format. Take half PPR or even standard out. There are some people that still play standard out there. Take those formats and he becomes a lot less appealing. He's going to see consistent volume in this offense as that kind of schemed usage type player.
There are multiple narratives. We mentioned the London hangover, Tyrod Taylor revenge game a little bit. That was back when they made the playoffs and they were like, he had the shortest leash I've ever seen out of any player a few years ago. So he had those things going. I don't know if you buy into them. I will just talk about the play before the half. And I realize that, there's certain things you can't do, right? Can't take a sack if it's a pass play. You can't run it with basically no time left. But Cody, why even the announcers seemed to think it was a run pass option and he audibled into what he thought would be the better play. Doesn't some of that fall on Brian Daboll here? Like, why even call the option there? Or just call the pass. You could have like 3 cracks at the end zone if you call 3 passes in a row.
Well, first off, it's complete incompetence because we've heard this a million times in these situations. Tony Romo's the best at it because literally every time this situation comes up in any quarter, at any time, he's like, 14 seconds. If you got no timeouts, you need at least 14 seconds to reset the football and get the spike in. You need at least 4. He said it a million times. I could just hear it in my head over and over from Tony Romo. 14 seconds. You need 14 seconds. And what they have last night, they had, was it 9 or 10? And they run the football, and it's like pretty clear that it's not going to, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever get the full answer to, maybe what the call was initially, and then if it was audible or not, or if it was a run play call. But as being Tyrod Taylor, you need to know, he's been in the league for over a decade. You need to know in that situation, like, there's no running the football, especially behind one of the worst offensive lines in football. And you have a Darren Waller that's 6'6" and a guy that can win in the red zone. Like, none of it made any sense to me. So I'm not running the football. I don't care if I have Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. In that specific situation with no timeouts and less than 10 seconds on the clock, where if you fail, it's a 0. In a 6-0 football game against the Buffalo Bills where you can go up 9-0, none of it makes any sense. So that's just kind of where I'm at.
You can hear Tony Romo's voice in your head saying, Jim, 14 seconds, Jim. I don't know. Are they going to make it? I don't know. Get the spike. Oh, they got it. All right. Now, real quick, before we get to the next one, everybody listening, watching, sportstopia.io. We talk about incompetence at the goal line in the game last night. No incompetence at all at sportstopia.io. You got the rankings. You got the Contrarian Edge optimizer if you're trying to make a DFS lineup and win a little change. And you got a little humor too. You got a mix of everything. All right, so guys, I don't know if you know this, but the hottest club in the NFL over the weekend was the Blue Medical Tent. It featured such names as Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Justin Fields, David Montgomery, Trevor Lawrence, Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyron Williams at the end of the game, and Ryan Tannehill across the pond. Mark, what did you make of the carnage yesterday? I mean, those are big names.
Yeah, it's to be expected, to be honest. Coming into the season, we started to see a lot of the soft tissue stuff, because I think that is honestly the game of the NFL, the game of football, the game of in the NFL. Sorry, is guys that run really, really fast for 7 seconds, and then they stop, they walk around, and then they do that for 10 minutes, and then they go sit on a bench. So this game that we are watching is going to be a breeding ground for soft tissue injuries. There's discussions around the league about whether or not artificial turf contributes to major injuries, Achilles, ankle, knee stuff. But this game is you're going to see injuries just based off how it is played. The soft tissue injury rate is much higher than a more fluid game like hockey or like soccer, where you are more used to, your muscles are more used to staying warm for longer periods of time. Same thing with baseball, where you're supposed to sprint for 90 feet and then you stand around for a long time. That is just, your body is not used to doing that. So right off the bat, we know that this game is going to incur higher injury rates than when you compared to other sports. And it's just typically, it's going to happen. We've seen that rate be a little more exaggerated to begin this season. And I don't know, I'm not a medical expert. I don't know if some of that has to do with the shortened off season, the shortened preseason. I don't really know, because we see a lot of the stars are not even playing NFL snaps in the preseason. I don't know if any of that contributes to the heightened injury rate that we're seeing this year. But we have to have this understanding that like depth matters when we're playing fantasy football, because these things are going to happen.
Yeah. And the depth thing is what I was going to say, because this is when you start talking about handcuffs, right? Like at the beginning of the season, depending on how you're trying to build a roster or build your best team, there are some schools that thought like, oh, maybe I'll just get lucky and I won't need a handcuff. And then there are other people who grab a handcuff and all of that. So I guess, Cody, we'll start there. I was going to say, what do you think will have the biggest impact? I don't know how long Christian McCaffrey is going to be out, but I guess that's your number one name, right? I mean, I think he's scored in every game he's ever played ever in his life, it feels like. Losing that in the 49ers offense, and it was clear in that Niners game, like they needed something other than what they had after when they went down. So you look at Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel also went down. You look at those guys, and I guess you start looking at the backups. Jordan Mason, a backup for CMC there. Is he a guy you're targeting? Should he have even been on the waiver wire to begin with at this point?
I'm going to be honest with you. I kind of just want to stay away from this backfield because of what this offense brings to the table. It's probably going to be a contrarian thought for this team, but even with Deebo being hurt, like they went into that, it seemed like anyways, going into that game yesterday, they had that thing planned out to be kind of a Deebo game, because once Deebo went out and McCaffrey went out, they kind of seemed like they were in a tizzy. And I think that's one of the benefits to having Kyle Shanahan, is that he can kind of do what Bill Belichick has always done, which is like have every game planned a different specific way to where you can take advantage of the defense. And it kind of blew up in their face, obviously, with McCaffrey and Debo getting hurt. But when you're talking about this backfield, like Tyrion Davis-Price, Jordan Mason, Elijah Mitchell, like there's a bunch of guys here that are fine. They can run the football. They can get opportunities. Is there an opportunity for maybe one of these guys that ends up getting a little bit more of the bulk of the carries, maybe scores a touchdown or two, and you get burnt on it? Sure, maybe. But I think in the long term, it's going to be more featuring of Kittle, because we've seen the off and on of Kittle, right? 3 touchdowns last week, 1 catch this week. Like the most annoying thing at the tight end position is one of the most prolific guys getting weird usage like that. Brandon Ayuk being able to actually be in a full-blown alpha situation in this offense. If Debo's missing time and McCaffrey's missing time, like that's going to be focal points. It's going to be shifted towards Kittle and Ayuk on a weekly basis. The offensive line is good, so one of these running backs will be fine, but it's finding out which one on a consistent basis, and I'm not sure I really want to be in that. I don't want to go out and put 30% fab on any of these 3 guys and then have the other one be the dude. So that's kind of like, I just don't trust it, I guess, is where I'm at. I'd like to hear what Mark thinks on that, because I honestly, that's my kind of attitude towards it. I'd like to more aim towards a backfield where I kind of understand and can feel what's going to happen, versus this one where it's up to Kyle Shanahan on the given week, in my opinion.
Mark, are you buying or selling that backfield?
I think if you're going to take a stance, it probably should be on Elijah Mitchell. Yes, Jordan Mason outsnapped him 15-7, but we have to remember Elijah Mitchell was coming off of 2 missed games due to injury. And if we look at recent history, I mean, even as soon as in week 3, I mean, Elijah Mitchell has struggled to stay healthy. Even looking at this year, he's missed 3 games already this season. But if you look at the highest snap rate of a running back on this team not named Christian McCaffrey, it came through Elijah Mitchell in week 3 at 34%. So he's been with the team for a while. He's familiar with Kyle Shanahan. He's familiar with the scheme. And he has shown that he can be productive in that scheme. We look at last year to begin the season before CMC came over. He's had some fantasy reliability there. So if I'm taking a shot, and if Christian McCaffrey misses time, which all of those are still kind of up in the air, it's probably on Elijah Mitchell. And to echo kind of what Cody was saying, this could be a spot, particularly in the immediate future, where George Kittle is featured. And it makes sense when you look back, playing Monday morning quarterback here for a little bit. It makes sense via or against the elevated blitz rates and the elevated man coverage of Jim Schwartz's defense over in Cleveland, that Kittle is going to be kind of like a 6th offensive lineman in the spot. And that kind of, after the first 2 drives where San Francisco was really struggling to move the football, we saw Kittle in line at an insane rate for the rest of the game. And kind of I think it's a testament to Jim Schwartz and what he's doing over in Cleveland, really. But moving forward, I think Kittle has to be one of those featured pieces.
And I think, what was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Elijah Mitchell was the revelation of fantasy football when Mostert went down. Still couldn't even stay healthy that year, but came back and still, again, was a running back that was targeted in that offense before CMC came over. So I think you're onto something there. I do think it'll be interesting to see. I saw a tweet yesterday about how, man, Brock Purdy really doesn't look that good when he's not throwing screens to CMC or Debo and they're taking it 70 yards to the house. Not that I'm saying that he doesn't have game, but I think if either of those if CMC missed extended time, I think then you'd really see if Brock Purdy is Mr. Irrelevant, just the game manager. Is he a fantasy asset? Because he was putting up 20-point games for you up until that point. So I think it'll be interesting going ahead, but we'll see how the injury news shakes out. Cody?
That was a really good defense. Like I talked about, I don't know if it was on this show or another one, but being that Brock Purdy would be a top 10 option rest of season. And this was the game that was like on the marker or on the schedule that was like, I don't really want a part of that one, but the rest of the season's fine because the Browns have done this. They've gotten after the passer every single week, and it's a vaunted defense right now, but they're not getting respected because it's Cleveland and because they're not winning as many games. But that was a brutal matchup to begin with.
Yeah, it was a tough one. I don't think anybody really wants to go into Cleveland and play. And I'm sorry, is it just me or does it look like they never have good weather? Like what
ever
is there? Never. Like there's just never good weather in Cleveland. Moving on to some of those other big names. from one running back to another running back, and I want to start with Cody, who has basically staked his season on it being a Jahmyr Gibbs truther. David Montgomery goes down. Gibbs out for now, but I mean, is it Gibbs time? What do you see going forward from this offense? I mean, it's not like Dan Campbell gave him glowing reviews this past week by just calling him a change of pace back, but now he might be forced to be the guy.
So that's kind of like, I don't know. So they're not utilizing it the same way the Buffalo is, obviously, but that's kind of what James Cook really kind of is. He's kind of a change of pace plus and whatever. But in Detroit, I guess your question is like, is it going to be now leaned into Gibbs? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it, especially coming off injury himself. This is the second injury in the season for Montgomery, so that's definitely interesting because he's been, very prolific for our fantasy teams. Craig Reynolds looked fine. Zonovan Knight's out. Jahmyr Gibbs is banged up. I'm kind of interested to see what they do because this is a team where talked about Fournette last week, potentially going to like Dallas to kind of giving them a little ignition next to Tony Pollard. But they just beat Tampa. Tampa's a respected football team, a top 10 team, some would say, in the league this year. Detroit wins that game. They're 5-1 now. They're in the driver's seat. They could clinch the NFC North before Thanksgiving if they beat the Packers.
Hey.
I'm a Viking fan. Listen. I know. I'm just saying they beat the Packers before Thanksgiving. It's over with, and I'm a Viking fan too, so I got nothing. But Leonard Fournette maybe like who else? You have to start. They have to have already been looking outside the building because this Montgomery thing is now a second injury. Gibbs already banged up. You're looking at Craig Reynolds. I'm not sure who their fifth guy on the roster is as far as their practice squad guy. I could look that up, but I'm not going to do that for dead air time. Zigbo. Okay. Is it really?
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, he got a little bit of opportunity down in Jacksonville. I don't know. You're not going to roll with that though. You're not going to roll up and be like, yeah, well, Zigbo's our guy, but the offensive line is good. So I could see them doing that, but why not go after a Fournette? Why not do something like this? But to answer your question, I guess in full, Matt, is I love Gibbs, but he's coming off an injury. So I can't really continue to be like, in Dynasty, of course, I'm still buying him. But like as far as this week, it's like, or the next 3 weeks, like it's especially with what they're saying about the change of pace stuff.
And Jared Goff. It's Jared Goff MVP time. That's what it is. It's Jared Goff playing MVP ball. The redemption story is here. Sorry, Mark. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, my fault. I was trying to jump in there real quick. Also, the Lions play the Ravens in week 7. So it's not the best matchup where we're like, oh, yeah, let's do a plug and play for whoever's going to be the lead back in Detroit. This is a no kidding defense that they're going up against. When you look at kind of their heavy zone rates, it again plays well into Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it might just be a situation where, DMO doesn't miss too much time and their schedule over the next couple of weeks is kind of brutal. So.
The other injury I do want to talk about is actually a guy who wasn't injured, but he is definitely going to be affected. And this is just based on so the Trevor Lawrence news I saw today is that he's actually considered day-to-day. It might not be bad. So I won't talk about Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk, especially if, T-Law is going to come back. Everything's going to pretty much remain status quo there. But what about Justin Fields and more so DJ Moore? And this is the DJ Moore experience that I talk about because we know what he can do. And probably regardless of quarterback, we know what he could do. But we were playing the game right before we went on air about how to pronounce Tyson Bagent's name. I think I got that right. Is that what we're going with? Bagent?
Bagent.
Bagent. Secret Bagent, man. All right, great. I love it. So, Mark, I don't know. DJ Moore was, rocketed into the stratosphere on that Thursday night game against Commanders. And now, is all hope lost? I mean, I just didn't see a lot out of Bagent and that offense without Fields in there. I didn't really see much with Fields in there yesterday.
Yeah, it's we have, myself included, we have, as a fantasy community, we have lauded Luke Getsy's game planning coming into the last 2 games. So week 4 and week 5. They basically lit the world on fire in the first half, each of those games. And then we kind of saw that he's not the best game manager when he's punched in the face. Each of the last 2 weeks, they struggled to score. They struggled to move the football. They struggled with turnovers in the second half. That's on Luke Getsy. That's not just a Justin Fields thing. He had a fumble and a turnover and a pick in week 4 in the second half. He turned the ball over in the second half of week 5. That's also on Luke Getsy. And so the fact that this team struggled so mightily in the first half with Justin Fields against a mediocre, not terrible, they have a great defensive coordinator in Minnesota. The fact that we saw them struggle so heavily kind of places that discussion back on Luke Getsy. Like, are you as good as we thought at game planning? If you take Luke Getsy's coaching career in a micro lens and look at like what he has been able to accomplish, we do have to consider him a plus game planner. And we've seen this where he has not been able to, dating back to his time in Green Bay, he has not been the best at reacting to if the situation is different. And what we saw yesterday is this team did not blitz him at the elevated rates that they thought, I think, coming into the game. And that kind of threw Luke Getsy for a fit. And now he's like, oh, crap, I thought we were going to get a ton of man coverage and cover 3 against elevated blitz rates, and we're not seeing that. How do we move the football now? So that whole discussion, I think, is like, how does that now change if we're going to get Bagent to agent here moving forward over the next couple of weeks? I don't know. And Justin Fields' injury, we haven't gotten an injury update, but it looked like it could have been on the severe high ankle sprain type, based on how awkwardly he came down, how the defender fell on his leg, and how it was kind of positioned. Again, I'm no medical expert, but it looked like a high ankle sprain to me. So yeah, this team could be forced. Now we're throwing another curveball at Luke Getsy to say, hey, go game plan for now this changing scenery. He has done it in the past. He did it last year where he basically said, hey, all of this is not working. I have this highly mobile quarterback. We're going to build the offense around that. They came into this year, and Luke Getsy's basically saying, like, we're going to try and transition Justin Fields into a pocket passer that also has mobility. We're not going to base our entire offense around it. And it appeared for a while, it was a sample size of 2 weeks against some non-elite opponents, but it appeared that could be on the correct path. Now kind of throw a huge wrench into that. And I think it all, to answer your question again in a roundabout way, it all comes down to Luke Getsy's ability to game plan, because we kind of know that he is not the best game manager as far as reacting to what is happening in a game.
Well, I need 3 touchdowns a week out of DJ Moore. I don't know how else I could say that, but that's what I need going forward. That's my offer to Luke Getsy. All right. Look, we talked about the 49ers already. Obviously, just a perfect storm of things that happened there. So, look, you want to give them a pass on that Browns loss, that's fine. I don't know if I'm willing to give the Eagles as much of a pass. And here's why. They lose to the Jets, right? And I don't think anybody would tell you the Jets defense is bad, but they were missing their top 2 corners. And those are pretty big losses there. And so you already have the advantage with your 2 wide receivers that could be wide receiver 1s on any team in the league. So I don't know what happened. Jalen Hurts reverted. If you want to call him Superman, he was Clark Kent. It's not. He threw some disgusting interceptions. What happened? What did you see there? What happened to that offense?
I definitely thought, coming in, you mentioned the top 2 corners were down. Also, cornerback 3 and 5 were down, Hardy and Eccles. So they were really beat up. But on the other side of that, Philly also had 2 defenders missing, but that did not impact their offense. Their offense should have been dialed in from the jump. And then you see Hurts come out and throw 3 picks that, a couple of them were what they were, but That was not a good game by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. And I gave a lot of credit to this offense and their scheming and their ability to use and utilize DeAndre Swift in certain situations to elevate this offense. We've seen Dallas Goedert have his little game. We've seen A.J. Brown, as soon as he got upset a couple weeks ago, all of a sudden it's been back-to-back 100-yard games. Awesome. This one yesterday was teed up perfectly for this offense to just completely have all the wheels, all the tires lubed up, full of air, and go. And nothing. 11 targets for Devonta Smith, 5 receptions. I can sit back and say this because I don't know what it looks like on the inside. But what it seems to be is kind of something similar to what Mark just alluded to with the Bears, is like the game planning on the offensive side is not completely dialed in, and that is they have a lot of talent. Right. They're not, and the only team that I think really can compete with them as far as the talent is San Francisco with McCaffrey, Ayuk, Debo, Kittle. You're looking at this offense, Swift. He's putting himself into a conversation of top tier running backs right now as far as how efficient he's running. This duo is awesome with Brown and Smith, and then they have Goddard. It's almost like it's too many weapons where they can't get everyone the ball. Like this should be so much more efficient, so much easier. So I'm going to blame it on the coach, and I'm going to blame it on the game planning. I'm going to blame it on the offensive coordinator, but also couple that with Jalen Hurts just was not efficient and productive yesterday.
Yeah, too many weapons. Mark, I wanted to talk about Devonta Smith specifically. Like, I know A.J. Brown, basically pulled the Keyshawn Johnson, give me the damn ball, and he got it, and he's doing great, and he's elite. I mean, he's elite. Nobody's going to argue that. But it's not like Devonta Smith can't be. It's not like we've never seen him do it. I thought this offense would be able to support both of them, but like Cody just said, too many weapons. Like, am I wrong here? If I have Devonta Smith on my team, should I look at him as more of like a high ceiling wide receiver 3, or how are we looking at him?
Yeah, I think you have to at this point. There's a lot of connection between Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown is an outspoken alpha wide receiver. Jalen Hurts is A.J. Brown's son's godfather. There's a lot of connection going on there. But
nepotism.
The fact of this offense is they can really win, or up until last week, they have proven that they can really win any way they want. And that can change on a weekly basis. We saw last week, where Dallas Goedert was featured heavily early, and they kind of just rode that because it was working. Went over 100 yards with a score. This offense is really unique in the sense that they are so dynamic as far as play calling abilities, as far as maximizing the talent that they have on their roster, that we're going to see these ebbs and flows, and it's very difficult from a managed league perspective where you're making those start-sit decisions. Right now, to put in anybody but DeAndre Swift, Jalen Hurts, or A.J. Brown as kind of the key cogs of the most recent form of this offense. That said, like Dallas Goedert or Devonta Smith, they are very clearly elite level talents. It's just that up until last week, we hadn't seen schemed usage for Dallas Goedert. His ADOT was mediocre. He had only 5 red zone opportunities, I think. And last year that number was 10. The year before that, it was like 9 and 8. So he's not like a heavy contributor in the red zone as well. So Devonta Smith, if you look at his per route efficiency metrics, though, he's still amongst the top 12 wide receivers in the league against both man and zone. The volume has not yet been there. At any point, that could change. Great best ball piece if you're doing like best ball resurrections over an underdog. But as of right now, for managed leagues, you can't really sit him, but it becomes very difficult to throw him into your roster. This is still a guy that could go for 30-plus points at any moment.
What do you think of? So I had this guy ask this question. He's asked me 2 weeks in a row on my start sit show on Sundays. He's got A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, and Devonta Smith. And both weeks I've had to tell him to sit Devonta Smith. What do you like? If I'm an owner of Devonta Smith, what do I even do with him right now? Because like for me, it's I want to just wait, and I want to wait, and I want to wait, and I want to trust it. But he's also got a lot of name value. Like, what are you doing with him?
I mean, you could throw him on the block for sure. In managed leagues, he's a tough start-sit decision, just like you said. I would have recommended sitting Devonta Smith out of those wide receivers as well each of those weeks. Throw him on the block, see if there's any interest, throw out some feelers. at this point, especially if you're like using that roster as an example. If you're that stacked at wide receiver, that name value is going to have trade value as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, I don't know what that guy's running back situation is, but if he just got hurt at running back, if he lost somebody or anything, I'm sure Devonta Smith can land him a serviceable. Because at that point, you're talking about between Devonta and Puka, and if you saw the game yesterday, and again, it could have been just game planning, but they're pretty much going to give you the same amount of output. You know, maybe Puka's going to get the better of him 1 week. Devontae's going to go off 1 week. You don't know. That's the dart throw. But yeah, my strategy in fantasy is usually I don't want to think too hard. I want to have the guys I know I want to start. So I'm more likely to make a trade if it's going to give me a headache. And that's usually how that goes. That's patented advice. You could tell that guy in the Start Sit show that Matt Galka said trade him. Mark said trade him, and we're all saying trade him. All right. So usually, we don't talk about the Monday night game ad nauseum. We usually just do a quick thing, but I do want to feature Mark a little bit because, we have the Contrarian Edge optimizer over at sportstopia.io. I mean, we've seen it get results for some people, some folks in the company already. Maybe not going 0 for 150 lineups, but we've seen it get results. So, Mark, I want to ask you about tonight's matchup. We've got Cowboys, Chargers. We'll talk about, Eckler, some of the guys coming back. But if you're looking at tonight's matchup, you want to throw a lineup together. I guess for somebody new to kind of going the contrarian route, who do you think the public would be all over tonight? And how do you pivot away from that to try and get an advantage?
Yeah, the thing that I like to do the first thing when I open up the optimizer is run it without changing any of the settings, because that gives you a good idea of where the ownership is expected to go, how the field is likely to handle this situation, and how the pieces kind of fit together within that broad spectrum. Today, the optimizer is spitting out both passing games. You've got Jake Ferguson that are popping up everywhere. You've got even down to some secondary, tertiary members of the Dallas pass offense. Michael Gallup is popping up pretty much across the board. So when I look at that immediately, and when you think about like how the game can play out, think about like a guy like Austin Eckler, who's coming off of an extended absence with an ankle injury, but we know that he is a heavy contributor in both the run game and the pass game and in the red zone where it counts. If Austin Eckler's touchdowns are coming on the ground, or if Dallas just happens to get tackled inside the 5-yard line and Tony Pollard gets the scoring opportunities, or even Rico Dowdle, thinking about like, we don't expect this game environment to fail. We expect points to be scored, but how do we get bulk scoring in the NFL? We get it through like busted plays and yardage, and we get it through touchdowns. And both of those are highly variant. So when I see the optimizers, before I'm altering any settings, spitting out heavy emphasis on each of these pass games, I start to think, well, what if the touchdown variance swings another way? What if these offenses struggle in the red zone? We've seen Dallas have issues in the red zone in the past. How could that influence kicker scoring, for example? And then I start to look at the micro matchup perspective. When we look at the Dallas defense, they are one of the top 3 defenses in the league. They've had some injury issues in recent history, but they play a lot of cover 1. And we have an offensive coordinator on the other side in Kellen Moore, who has a very adaptable week-to-week offensive game plan. And if I'm sitting in his shoes and I have a lot of cover 1, I've talked a lot this offseason about wanting to get Justin Herbert attacking more downfield. How does that all line up in this particular spot? Well, I'm probably going to be calling up a lot more downfield work. And a guy like Joshua Palmer, who has that disgusting red questionable tag attached to his name, has an over 30% targets per route run rate against cover 1 this year. So that's a place of potential leverage as well. People are going to be a little bit more hesitant to throw him into rosters this week with that questionable tag. We know he popped up late on the injury report on Saturday with a groin injury, but the reports this morning are that he's going to play. So those are just some interesting, I like to start big picture, see what the optimizer is giving me And that kind of gives me a feel for how the pieces fit together on a roster this week and how I expect the field to behave. And now look for those leverage angles. I think Austin Eckler is a big one this week. And I think Joshua Palmer is a big one as well.
We got Air Jordan 420 in the comments saying this is solid content. Well, we appreciate that. Tell your friends. This is the kind of do I read the whole thing?
Yes.
Do I read the whole thing? Or do I just
There are rules,
cap
damn
it
it, Mike.
do I just cap it at this is solid content? Well, we appreciate that. Tell your friends, sportstopia.io. It's the kind of content you can only get from Sportstopia. Mark's analysis on being contrarian, and really, I mean, if you've ever played a DFS lineup, I'll tell you what, as you know, when I first started as a novice, it's like, oh, this is easy. I'll just pick the best players. But then you look at the lineups that win, and it's got like a kicker in there, or it's got like a defense in there. You got to think contrarian. You got to think outside the box, which is why I think it's important to get that kind of analysis. And Cody, kind of to Mark's point, but in another contrarian way, you've talked about guys being set up as being a 2. They are a 2. They are a great backup. They are a great spell back. You like Joshua Kelley tonight, as the Robin to Eckler's Batman here. Do you think he can still do what he had 90 yards and a touchdown? I think week 1. Do you still think he could do those type of things against this Cowboys defense tonight?
I don't like. I mean, that's high praise, right? Finishing the RB12 is kind of a tough thing to do, especially in the backfield with Austin Eckler. But the thing and kind of why I brought this up was because he was literally owned in 30% of leagues on Sleeper after having a couple of miserable weeks as the lead back in this offense. So everyone's burnt. Everyone's like, you know what? I spent my fab. He burnt me. He hasn't given me anything. And now Eckler's back. They had a bye last week.
That's what I'm saying.
And everyone's just dropping him. But the thing is he showed us. And, you can cherry pick last year's a handful of games where he was a top 40 guy. There was a game where he was an RB16, but it's really been a continued conversation with Austin Eckler, specifically on his show he does with Matt Harmon over on Yahoo, where he's like, I need somebody to be next to me. I want a guy that I can depend on to be next to me in this backfield so that I don't have to be in here for 95% of the snaps and get worn because he too is not 225 pounds, right? So I think Kelley is a consummate number 2. And when I say number 2, it's something that Michael Lombardi, who's taking a lot of heat today, has talked about, is that in the NFL, there's a number of these backs that you look at and you're like, yeah, this guy's elevated. He can really take over and be a number 1 in the NFL, like a Tony Pollard, right? Pollard sat behind Zeke. But we're like, as soon as he gets that opportunity, man, it's going to be fireworks. But there's also guys like Kelley, like an A.J. Dillon, like Chuba, that aren't going to give you a consistent long stretch of RB1 output that you're expecting out of the guy that's in front of them. So I think a guy like Joshua Kelley has more standalone. Jalen Warren's another one that's had standalone value by himself this year, even though he's not the RB1, where I think Kelley with Eckler will be more efficient, have better fantasy finishes on the stretch because of the ability to stay efficient, get work in the passing game, and things of that nature. So I'm back in on Kelley. I mean, I never really went out on him. I just never really bid up on him, I guess, this year. But I think you just ride with what they've told you. And Eckler wants somebody next to him, and Kelley's been efficient with him in the game together.
Mark, you mentioned Joshua Palmer. I know, and you talk about other expectations, I'd say. A guy like Quentin Johnston, the rookie in that offense, would that be ever a route that you'd consider? Or is that just like too contrarian?
Quentin Johnston, I think we've talked about him before on this show, but he is not a pro-ready wide receiver. He played for an air raid offense in college. He does not do the things other than run a route that wide receivers in today's NFL are asked to do. We see a guy like Darius Davis seeing offensive snaps, and until week 3, Darius Davis was playing over Quentin Johnston as well. Quentin Johnston did see a career high in route participation and snap rate in week 4 in the first game without Mike Williams, but he was still only on the field 51% of the offensive snaps. So to me, the fact that Darius Davis has performed in a downfield role, the fact that we know this offense would like to, and this could be a contributing factor today as well, they would like to utilize increased rates of 12 personnel in game environments that they're able to control. I say that because Donald Parham picked up that wrist injury in week 4, but he's had the bye week. So we don't know, is he going to play? Is he going to be effective? What's his snap rate going to look like? All that good stuff. So if Donald Parham misses, if Joshua Palmer is limited or misses completely, then Quentin Johnston could potentially be a guy that they lean on a little bit heavier. There's also the added...
That's too many ifs. That's too many ifs.
There's also the added fact that Austin Eckler is making his return to the lineup. So to me, again, if I'm in Kellen Moore's shoes, I'm primarily looking at Keenan Allen, who has a 34% targets per route run rate against single high or cover 1 coverages, and Joshua Palmer, who's got a 32% targets per route run rate against that coverage. And we know that Dallas leads the league in that coverage set on the defense. I'm typically looking to, or I'm primarily looking to those two guys and Austin Eckler to kind of build my game plan around. Maybe get the onesie twosie design play to Quentin Johnston because we know what he can do with the ball in his hands, but primarily looking to attack downfield in one-on-one coverage.
We got a question I'm hoping we get a question in the chat. Vinny asked if he could drop a question. Vinny, we got about 3 minutes. If you can get it in, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to answer it. Cody, I guess we'll sort of tail out with this, talking about the Cowboys tonight. I mean, they were embarrassed last week. They have another primetime game. I don't know if you can say with their record and how they're doing that this is a must win, but I mean, you'd think they would like to come out with a good performance here, especially offensively.
I mean, 3-3 going into a bye with the Eagles, Seahawks, Eagles, Bills, Dolphins, Lions down the stretch. It's kind of a win now. Like they kind of need this game to not get behind the 8 ball because I just named off games: Lions, Dolphins, Bills, Eagles. That's 5. If you lose those 5, you're looking at a 9-8 season. You're not making the playoffs. So they need to really get something going here. This is a big game for both teams, the Chargers and the Cowboys in this one. Chargers sitting at 2-2 coming out of the bye. This should be back and forth because the Cowboys needed just as much as the Chargers. Chargers need just as much as the Cowboys. And I like everything Mark said about Quentin Johnston too. Like that's the only thing that I would say is his routes have went up each of the last couple of weeks. He's not polished by any means, but he does bring some athleticism to the table where you could see a Jameson Williams type line like we saw yesterday, 2 for 50 and a touchdown. But that's not something you're going to depend on in any way, shape, or form. But you are coming out of the bye, which with these rookies, we usually see a little bit of a boost if there's any competence with them as rookies. So there's potential there, but I'm not holding my breath at all with Quentin Johnston.
QJ. All right, let's get to Vinny's question. My RBs are Bijan, Kamara, Ken Walker, and I'm flexing CD. I need 3 of them to start and 1 to the bench. Who are you guys going with? Look, just right off the bat, CD is probably, the person I'm most disappointed in that list. I don't know. What do you guys think on a week-to-week basis? But CD has the PPR potential. So quickly, guys, Mark, out of that list, who are you benching?
True. It's going to be matchup specific. It's hard to say on a question like this, where we have 4 guys that can start on a weekly basis. So it's going to be matchup specific for me.
All right, Cody, 10 seconds.
Yeah, matchup specific completely. But if I guess I had the gun to head, I guess I'm benching Lamb.
So, all right, I guess we're benching Lamb, Vinny. It's a good problem to have, though. Thank you for the question. I hope we helped. I hope you guys enjoy this. Check us out, sportstopia.io. And until next week, everybody, have a great week of football.